This revolution in consciousness has been described as no small matter at all. It has been described as being as significant as, or more significant than the scientific industrial revolution, more significant than the Copernican revolution, or even the Neolithic revolution when we invented agriculture. In fact, some say it is as significant as the emergence of life on planet Earth 4 billion years ago. So it is no small matter. And I've just remembered now I've got some slides for you. There we go. Not that one, I'm bypassing that now. There you go. I was going to give you a humorous Looney cartoon, but we're running a little short of time, so I'm going straight into the challenge. So yes, it's a pretty big deal, because it's becoming very obvious by the day, dear friends, that humankind is on a high-tech, high-consumption joyride into an abyss, and we're taking a great deal of the natural world with us. And sadly, well, as we've been actually, the scientists say we've caused a sixth mass extinction on the planet since the birth of life 4 billion years ago. It's a pretty big achievement. And sadly, we have no well-meaning reduction in carbon emissions or use of plastic bags, or even economic and political reforms are going to do anything more than slow down the vehicle. The only hope we have of changing our trajectory and averting disaster is to change the consciousness of the driver. It is human consciousness that is now the driving force of evolution on planet Earth. Natural selection doesn't apply anymore. There isn't a single atom on the planet at the moment that is not impacted upon by human behavior, by human consciousness. It has been aptly said that at this time in our history, consciousness finds itself in a race against catastrophe. And the current catastrophic driver is the ego or separate self. And it is deeply, deeply embedded in a story of separation. A separation story that's been propagated and cultivated and amplified by, of course, our pathologically masculine-dominated Western culture. It's a story that tells us that our mind is separate from our body, that we are separate from each other, that we are separate from the natural world, and perhaps most tragically of all, it has separated us from our own inner depths. One of your many poetic geniuses, John O'Donoghue, put the latter aberration this way. He said, our neon times have neglected and evaded the depth kingdoms of interiority in favor of the ghostly realms of cyberspace. Our world becomes reduced to intense but transient foreground. The story of separation and the gross materialism it has spawned is simply not worthy of us, beloveds, not worthy of us. We're capable of a much grander consciousness than the competitive, most often are not fear-driven, skin-encapsulated, as someone called it, ego. And we've seen, and we've worshipped and honored individuals throughout history, across cultures, who have manifested and embodied a very different level of consciousness, a consciousness that is connected to its divine source, that serves the earth community with compassion, that feels the sacredness of life, etc., etc. But that consciousness is no longer the prerogative of the saint or the mystic or the spiritual guru. It is the birthright of each and every one of us. And the time to bring it forth, the time to unveil it, because it's there, it's what Edith was talking about this morning, the real you. The time to unveil it is now, when consciousness finds itself in a race against catastrophe. And that's not such a big ask, really, because, we all have our mystical moments, we all have a sense of our own depth. I'll give the example of when we're in love, because we have a feeling then of being in love with life and the joy of life and that sort of bubbling up of consciousness from our depths. And I came across a lovely line from the Sufi mystic Rumi recently, and the popularity of Rumi across the planet is another signifier of our revolution in consciousness. There's so much more interest in mysticism and mystical poets. Anyhow, Rumi said, wherever you are and whatever you are doing, be in love. I thought that was very sweet. Because, of course, this consciousness we're wanting to bring forth is in love with life with a capital L. There is that quality of in-loveness there and joy. But in order to bring forth that new level of consciousness, in order to unveil our real self, as Edith was calling it, we really do need a new story. We need a new story. We need one that will inspire our better selves and help us to birth nothing less than a new humanity and a new world. And for over thousands of years, the human psyche has been nourished by uplifting creation stories that resonate with our natural yearning for meaning and purpose. The current absence of any such uniting narrative, as Rian was calling it, narrative story, the current absence of such a uniting story for humanity goes a huge way to explain how we've become so seduced by consumerism. Material progress and acquisition of goodies has become like a facade that masks the pointlessness of life. It's no wonder we have epidemics of depression, of drug addiction, of domestic violence, of teenage suicide, and so on. We need a new story, and we need to address the roots of these problems, which Rian was doing in her way, and I'm doing it from a slightly different perspective of a concept of self and our own consciousness and the story to cultivate that new consciousness. So we need a new story. There we go. The good news is that there are very positive signs that our dysfunctional story of separation is being replaced by a new story that's capable of bringing meaning and purpose and a sense of wholeness and holiness back into our lives. In other words, taking the ego out of the driving seat. It is known as the philosophy of evolutionary spirituality, not revolutionary spirituality, evolutionary spirituality. I prefer to call it evolutionary mysticism. And it tells us that the universe is not a purposeless conglomeration of dead matter that somehow accidentally brought forth something we call consciousness. How absurd. The universe is a living, evolving, endlessly creative, purposeful, divine mystery, and every atom, every cell, every living creature is an utterly sacred expression of a sublime transcendent consciousness. Now, it's a story that's inspired by, of course, and aligns beautifully with the cosmic drama, the big history as it's called, revealed to us by modern science. So in that sense, it goes a long way to integrating the long-term antagonism between science and spirituality. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, bless him, said that a wondrous future is possible for humankind if only we can integrate the discoveries of modern science with time-honored mystical insights into the nature of reality. And that's exactly what our new story is doing. Evolution is the most astounding discovery of the entire scientific enterprise. All evolutionary mysticism is doing is breathing sentience into that amazing discovery. Now, I just want to share with you that to get a handle on the awesome nature of evolution, because we've got just used the word and we sort of tend to take it for granted. I'd like you to sort of feel more deeply into it. And one of the great, one of the cosmologist and mathematician Brian Swimme, and he's first inspired me around evolutionary spirituality. Have any of you heard of Brian Swimme? Raise your hand, I can't see. Yeah, one. Okay. He's a gorgeous guy, and he produced something called Canticles to the Cosmos back in the 1990s, and I was just blown away by that, and it sort of healed the divide in me between my spirituality and my admiration for science. So he asks us to look at evolution this way. Take some hydrogen gas, which is a colorless, odorless gas. Familiar with it from school day chemistry, I'm sure. The simplest element. And it emerged very soon after what we call the Big Bang. Swimme says Big Bang, complete misnomer. You think Big Bang, you think shrapnel. It's not like that at all. It's a flaring forth of divine energy. And this hydrogen gas came was one of the first elements to come out of the light. Take that colorless, odorless hydrogen gas, leave it alone for 13.8 billion years, and it becomes rose bushes, giraffes, human beings, music of Bach and Beethoven, Taj Mahal, whatever. Now just think about that. It's miraculous. What is going on? It's so beautiful. So evolution. And here's the thing. The core revelation of evolutionary spirituality or evolutionary mysticism is that the transcendent consciousness that birthed this awesome mystery is at this time in our history becoming aware of itself through the consciousness of the human. And I'd just like to repeat that. The transcendent consciousness that birthed the awesome mystery that is our universe is at this time in history becoming aware of itself through the consciousness of the human. We're becoming vehicles of that transcendent consciousness. That's where our consciousness is moving when we transcend the ego. And it's so exciting and so beautiful. Well, I think so anyway. If we reflect deeply on it, it means that our evolutionary destiny to transcend our egos and allow this sublime intelligence to work through us consciously and creatively. Not my will, little ego, but thy will, capital T, capital W, be done. There's an expression in Taoism, the ancient wisdom of Taoism, which says that liberation comes when you are able to flow in the current of the eternal Tao. And the Tao is the divine intelligence, which you really can't define, but the great mystery. Flow in the current of the eternal Tao. It's a beautiful expression. And that's exactly what our new story is inviting us to do, to flow in the current of the eternal Tao. In the evolutionary mysticism, we call that divine will the impulse of eros, of love at work in the universe. And it's a core understanding that surrendering to this evolutionary impulse of uniting love brings ever greater levels of goodness, truth, and beauty into creation, and a great deal more joy into our personal lives. Our new story awakens the mystic in us. I believe all of us are mystics at heart. Some of you may have heard of Jean Houston. Anybody heard of Jean Houston? Gosh, right. Anybody? Not even one this time. Yes, of course you have, Rian. Yes. Jean Houston, oh, sorry, darling. Okay, girls, great. Jean Houston was one of the pioneering movers of the human potential movement back in the 1960s and 70s. She's still a very brilliant, powerful public speaker. She goes around the world with actually empowering a lot of women, especially in indigenous communities. She's still a strong voice for our new story. And she said recently, just listen to, I've got to quote it up here, haven't I? At this time in our history, the greatest accelerator of evolution is mystical experience. That's very profound. It's not artificial intelligence or quantum computers, it's mystical experience. The Christian mystic Father Wayne Teasdale put it this way in his wonderful book, The Mystic Heart. He said, and this is lovely too, mysticism is the most precious treasure which the human family has been entrusted with. And it is our most effective resource for transformation of attitudes, actions, and lives. I'll repeat that too. The mysticism is our most effective resource for transformation of attitudes, actions, and lives. In other words, the most effective way of transcending our egos and transforming our culture. In our consciousness revolution, we are entering the age of universal mysticism. For the first time ever, we are able to distill the mystical essence of all religious traditions, harvesting their core wisdom and their spiritual technologies. We've noted that especially in the spiritual technologies of the East that have been coming into the West. But a word of warning here. In the early stages of what I'm calling our mystical renaissance, it is so easy and understandable that these spiritual technologies like meditation and inner work and all this sort of stuff gets hijacked by the ego. And the spiritual journey then becomes all about my enlightenment, my health, my well-being, etc. And we see an awful lot of that in our age of, epidemic of narcissism that we unfortunately, our individualism has taken us to. So that is why our new story is so critical to our consciousness revolution, because it acts as an antidote to what has been called spiritual materialism, which you see a lot in the New Age. Witness the movie The Secret. An antidote to spiritual materialism, and also to transcendental escapism, just to go be bliss bunnies and so on. The mystical experience is calling us to be socially engaged. That's the new wave of spirituality, the new wave of mysticism. Our mystical experiences then become a means to awaken the divine will within us to serve the greater good. And of course, our mystical renaissance is in no small measure a consequence of the rise of the feminine in our time. Our masculine-dominated culture, Western culture, has given us the most amazing technology. We can't deny that. We honor it totally. But sadly and dangerously and tragically, it has practically left us in the Stone Age when it comes to spiritual technologies and inner wisdom. If we are to heal the deep wounds inflicted on us by our story of separation, the inner and the outer, the feminine and the masculine, being and doing must be brought back into balance. And I think it was Rian mentioned the yin, the yang, the balance of the yin-yang, that lovely yin-yang sign in Taoism is a symbol of that beautiful balance. In the language of sacred psychology, our consciousness revolution is goddess-inspired. She is the guardian of human interiority. She takes us beyond our ego into our inner depths, awakening our heart intelligence. Instead of the do's and the don'ts of the dogma of the patriarchy, she says, what may be, but consult your heart on the matter. No dogma, no priests needed. One of the, and in similar expression of this from naturalist David Abrams. I won't even ask if anyone's heard of David Abrams, given up on that one. David Abrams writes beautifully about our disconnect from the natural world. And he says, this is lovely, listen to this, carnally immersed as we are in this breathing planet, we each have our own intimate access to the big mystery. Isn't that lovely? No dogma, no priest. Carnally immersed as we are in this breathing planet, we each have our own intimate access to the big mystery. As we awaken to the goddess, the inner enriches the outer, and the world becomes re-enchanted, rejuiced with a sense of the sacred. And undoubtedly, one of the most powerful tools, in addition to sacred ritual, which we witnessed here on Saturday, and the wonderful work that Rochelle does, but one of the most powerful tools for authentically engaging with the goddess is mystic meditation. In mystic meditation, we're surrendering to the inner light of our own divinity and becoming vessels of divine love, or at least vehicles of divine love. Now that might sound very high-flown, but it's more real than you imagine. And I just love this verse from Hafiz, another of the mystic poets, Sufi mystic, 14th century. And he's using the metaphor of the rose to describe the encounter with the inner light. Isn't it beautiful? How did the rose ever open, I like to say, her heart and give to the world all of her beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against her being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. So, you know, that's just a beautiful way of saying how we do have to do the inner work. It's what darling Edith was talking about this morning, the awakening, the inner, it has to come from inside. We have to connect, let go of this ego, rational stuff that we think we've got all the answers here. We have to feel it. We have to awaken our heart intelligence. And that is really, can be done in many ways, but mystic meditation is very powerful. So actually, I would like very much to invite you now into a practice of mystic meditation on the third eye. I hope you're up for it at this stage in the day. I'm not suggesting for a minute that 15-minute practice on the third eye is going to take you into an experience of the transcendental light. However, third eye meditation can very easily and effortlessly take you into an inner space of thought-free stillness, which is very special. It makes you much more receptive to subtle energy and a sense of your inner presence. The third eye, incidentally, the mystic understanding of the third eye, it's a tunnel that runs from here out through the back here. So this is one of the part of our consciousness revolution. We have to discover our mystical anatomy. The scientific materialism and the story of separation has solidified us. You know, there's this body, and it's all wonderful, and my medical profession is marvelous, but we've got a subtle body, we've got subtle energy, we interact with each other through energy fields and so on. All this has to be wakened up as a part of our consciousness revolution. We need to be thawed out in so many ways. So I invite you into a meditation practice to awaken the third eye. Most meditation practices do start to open this center here, but it's very powerful to work on it consciously and in particular, because it's the gateway to the inner realms. Our five senses externalize us. This one takes us in. And that's going to be heard a lot more of, I'm sure, in the future, as we awaken to our mystical anatomy. Now, finding a thought-free space of stillness is no small matter. I'm sure you've heard of Eckhart Tolle. Tell me. Hands up, Eckhart Tolle. Oh, wow, we've got there, right. Eckhart Tolle was interviewed, I heard him being interviewed anyway, and he was asked, what's the greatest gift your spiritual awakening has given you? And after a very typical pregnant Eckhart pause, he said, I can choose not to think. And I thought that was really very good. I can choose not to think. Because you see, Descartes got it very wrong. It's not a question of I think, therefore I am. It is a question of I am when I don't think. So, we're going to try some I amness, right? So those of you who are interested anyway, so I'm going to invite you to sit with your spine free of the back of the chair, because in mystic meditation we keep the spine free of any contact, and put both feet flat on the floor. So you're sitting like that, hands on your lap or comfortably relaxed. If you're crowded with people, find a little bit of extra space. Don't sit on top of anybody. Oh, there's a lot of shuffling around. Some of you are participating. That's wonderful. Gosh, see if I can see you. Beautiful. And we're going to close our eyes and keep yourself vertical. Keep the back of your neck in line with your spine, because I'd like you to sit in mystic meditation with a sense of connecting with the earth below through your feet, and through a central channel coming up through the center of your body and out through the top of the head up to the heavens. And that's instantly a transformation in consciousness. Just feel that verticality. Feel the connection below and above. And take a few nice deep breaths, relaxing your whole body on your exhalation. Beautiful. Beautiful. Verticality is very special for the human being. We're going to awaken the third eye from the energy of the throat. Now, this might sound really weird, but just bear with me. I'm going to invite you to focus your awareness on the back of your throat, behind your Adam's apple, your larynx, and breathe with a degree of friction there. Feel the breath on the larynx, and I'll demonstrate with my mic how it sounds. Can you feel it? Can you hear me? Can you hear that? So the breath can come in through the nose or it can come in through the mouth, but just allow it and feel it in the back of the throat there, and just allow it to create a friction noise. Jaws relaxed, feel your verticality, connected above and below. Beautifully relaxed, nothing to worry about. End of the day, you're going to go home and have a lovely evening. Just bring yourself to the present moment, feeling the friction of the breath in the throat. Total focus of awareness on your throat. Feeling the sound of your breath in the throat. Don't lose your verticality in the process. Keep the neck aligned with the spine. Feeling your whole body soft, but your spine straight and strong. So many circulations of energy around the spine. beautiful to feel that central axis. Keep breathing with friction in the throat. So in the process of the meditation, we're going to move or experience the heart center through the third eye. But we're beginning with this throat friction. It's like a key to the third eye. Sadly, we're going to have to keep it fairly brief. Breathing with friction in your throat.
Breathing with the friction in the throat. But instead of placing your awareness in the larynx, become aware between the eyebrows. Awareness in between the eyebrows. Don't try to grasp the area with too tight a focus, or the process can't unfold. Gentle awareness of the area between your eyebrows. Flow with the experience. Flow with whatever spontaneously arises. If the breath naturally changes and becomes more intense, then allow it to do so. But make sure that you maintain your friction breathing. Remain aware in the middle of the eyebrows, breathing with your throat friction. Keep your eyes closed. Keep breathing with throat friction and hold your awareness between your eyebrows. If the experience becomes too intense for you, all you have to do is open your eyes and you will be brought back to normal consciousness. Remain with your eyes closed, breathing with the friction in the throat, awareness between the eyebrows. Start looking for a vibration in between the eyebrows. This can take different forms, either a clear vibration or a tingling, or even just a rather blurry pressure or weight or feeling of density in between the eyebrows. Don't try too hard to feel anything. Remain vacant and just allow things to happen. Keep your eyes closed and continue breathing with throat friction, holding your awareness between your eyebrows. As soon as the faintest feeling of vibration or tingling or pressure or density is perceived between the eyebrows, begin to connect the feeling, whatever it is, with the friction in the throat. Connecting means being aware of the friction in the throat and the vibration between the eyebrows at the same time. They seem to resonate with one another. If you are experiencing vibration or tingling in some other part of your body, for example in your arms, pay no attention to it. Just remain aware of the vibration or density or pressure between your eyebrows and connect it with the friction in your throat. No visualization, no imagining, just flow with what comes. Awareness between the eyebrows, awareness in the throat. Connect the vibration between the eyebrows with the vibration in the larynx. Now stop breathing with the friction in the throat. Do not focus on the vibration anymore. Just remain with your eyes closed and aware in the space between the eyebrows. Be extremely motionless. Experience a certain quality of absolute stillness. In that motionlessness, you can tune in to the energy around you. Observe if any feeling of light or color can be perceived in between the eyebrows. And now, connect your third eye with your heart energy. Awareness in the eye, awareness in your heart center, in the center of your chest. if necessary, heighten the connection with some friction breathing. The heart-eye connection can be profoundly transforming. Rest in your heart. When you're ready, very gently open your eyes. Gaze out into the world with a sense of still being in the inner space if you can. See how it softens your perception. The wonderful Joseph Campbell used to say, perceived from the heart, the world becomes a thou rather than an it, which is very lovely. And one of the great sages of the 20th century, Ramana Maharshi, described the aim of all spiritual practices as being to enable you to rest your consciousness at all times in your heart center, in your heart. This is the most amazing aspect of our mystical anatomy. It encompasses a lot more than the physical heart, of course. It's a center. Feel the center of it there, but it expands out beyond the body. So please, just a little feedback. Raise your hand if you had any sense of vibration in the third eye, or any sense of connection with the third eye there. That's good, that's lovely. And what about the third eye heart connection? Raise your hand if you could feel that. Beautiful. And just get a sense of how much stronger the feeling of our energy centers, our inside, energy is amplified, magnified by coming through the portal of the third eye. So, this is your first experience. I would like to mention to you that if you did enjoy the practice, that on my website there's a free download of 2 half-hour practices on meditation on the third eye. And also some relaxation practices you might enjoy. But so you can do it for the half an hour beginner's practice, and then there's a more half-hour, more advanced practice. Free download from the website. Lovely. So the essence of our consciousness revolution is an awakening of our heart intelligence. Our remarkable capacities for thought and reasoning become the tools of that heart intelligence. I came across a wonderful quote from popular guru again, Ram Dass, which I'm sure many of you heard of. And he said, the intellect is the power tool of separation. The intellect is the power tool of separation. The intuitive, compassionate heart is the doorway to unity. Isn't that beautiful? So that's what we're awakening in our consciousness revolution, our heart intelligence. And that way the ego is taken out of the driving seat, and we begin to embody a very different sense of self. Edith this morning referred to your real self, invited you to become your real self. I call it, at this stage in our evolution, the Snowflake Self, which I know has a bad press as a name among some, but I really like it because just as each snowflake is a gorgeous, unique condensation or crystallization of water, so each and every one of us, in essence, is a unique condensation, crystallization of the infinite. So we're moving in our early stage of evolution of consciousness from ego
to a higher level. Let's call it the Snowflake Self. Also, the Snowflake Self gives a sense of the lightness of being that comes in when you start to embody the Snowflake Self, or this next level of consciousness. And the other thing is, of course, that at this stage in our evolution, Snowflake Self conveys the message of instability, of fragility, because indeed, so easily we can contract back into the ice of the ego. We just have to react, and we're back in the ego. But with our witness consciousness allows us to see very clearly whether we're in the ego or the Snowflake Self, because their flavors are so totally different. For a start, let's look at some of the differences which you'll recognize in yourselves, I'm sure. The ego reacts, the Snowflake Self responds. As we saw exemplified with Edith this morning with the 14-year-old boy, she didn't react, she responded. She listened and responded. The ego is highly competitive. The Snowflake Self, competition is not on its palette of experience. It is not competitive, it never gets jealous. The Snowflake Self delights in the success of others. And there we go. And then the other difference which I love between them is something that that Andrew Harvey mentioned, that the ego tends to be sort of wanting to know and a bit dogmatic in its knowing. The Snowflake Self rests in the creative mystery of uncertainty. Isn't that beautiful? Rests in the creative mystery of uncertainty. But above all, the Snowflake Self loves to serve the greater good, and does so with humility, gratitude, and joy. When we move more deeply into our Snowflake Self, we come to understand what Joseph Campbell meant when he said that it's possible to participate joyfully in the sorrows of the world. Because when you begin to connect with your inner divinity, your divine light, and so on, you begin to tap into a well of causeless joy that paradoxically can be there no matter what's happening in the world. And I think we saw that manifested in Edith this morning. We see it, of course, manifested very clearly in the Dalai Lama and his joyousness, in spite of all the tragedy of his own people and country. And but, very often to reach that joy, there's no doubt that one has to go through usually profound heartbreak, profound grief. If you allow the grief and go more deeply into the grief, you will find the joy. And it's what the mystics call the long, dark night of the soul. You can go through a period of despair and so on. And that's very relevant to your work with domestic violence and all the horror stories that you're encountering, and the recovery of those who have suffered, is to go into that grief, support them in going into that grief, and hopefully with practices like mystic meditation, they will find the joy in life beyond it, as indeed Edith has. So it's very profound. So in short, our Snowflake Self is the consciousness that emerges when we realize, I haven't moved her on. Where we go? Snowflake Self. It's the consciousness that emerges when we realize the wisdom of the Dalai Lama when he speaks of the aim of life as being to embody the transcendent. It's exactly what we're talking about. However, it is important to understand that consciousness is evolving. The Snowflake Self is the next stage beyond the ego, if you like. We're only in the kindergarten stage of the evolution of consciousness. The Snowflake Self gives us a mere taste of what it yet may mean to embody the transcendent. But we won't worry about that. We'll just worry at the moment about nurturing our Snowflake Self as a first level. Now, embodiment is the key word, because it's no small matter. Again, it's nothing. Although Snowflake Self sounds a bit airy-fairy, in fact, when you start to use a computer analogy, bring the Snowflake Self online, you're actually switching to an entirely different operating system from the ego. In other words, it's changing your physiology. And neuroscience and MRI scans and so forth are now showing us that we create new neural pathways in our body. It's been shown that meditation changes brain function and so on. You're really changing your physiology when you start to embody a different consciousness. You don't have to change your DNA, but you can change the activity of your brain, and you begin to embody this whole new new system of responding. And gradually, in theory, in practice, the ego pathways will atrophy. They'll become no longer in use. So we can't underestimate the power, the transforming power of mystic meditation, of our new story, and so on and so forth. And in my work with teenage boys, there's a school near where I live that the principal is a spiritual evolutionary, and he has founded a school that takes in boys that have fallen through the cracks of mainstream education. Wounded, domestic, violent, anger, drug addiction, etc., wounded boys. And they are given practices like meditation, they're given the daily curriculum with sacred ritual, they're encouraged to believe in their own sacredness, their own Snowflake Self, etc. They come and camp at my place, and we meditate, and we play, and I interact with them, and they're just becoming such beautiful young men. One of them said to me the other week that the school had rescued him from suicide, and that many of his friends had said the same thing. Now, it's not rocket science, it's just changing the narrative, changing their sense of self and self-worth. And this is what our new combination of mystical practices and a new story can do so easily for young people. And this is where we're getting to the foundations of our transformation. I won't be long. How much? Now is it time, is it? Oh, for goodness sake. Oh, dear. That's terrible. I haven't even started to talk about sacred activism. Can I have a few more minutes? Yeah. Please. So, the thing is, you see, that one of the most exciting things about our new story is it's the understanding that each one of us in our Snowflake Self has a unique and holy part to play in the cosmic drama of evolution. And I love the analogy of saying that we're each like a shard of glass in the great rose window of Church Cathedral. We might not know what the bigger vision is or the bigger picture, but we have a sense of our unique gift and purpose in that vision, in that picture. And that's a very beautifully empowering thing, and that's what, for example, the boys began to understand, their role to play. And that brings us to the most exciting and hopeful aspect of our consciousness revolution, the emergence of what contemporary mystic Andrew Harvey calls sacred activism. So very briefly, sacred activism, I think you'll be hearing more about it tomorrow. Sacred activism is social engagement, activism from well-meaning desire for greater justice, peace, etc., gender equality, if it's motivated and guided by a connection with your own inner divinity, a connection with your Snowflake Self, or whatever you like to call it. It is so much more empowering. It brings social action to a totally different quantum leap in empowerment in terms of our transformations of the world. And when two or more, or three, or there's a gathering of sacred activists, that effect is amplified. What Andrew refers to so beautifully as networks of grace, that is combinations of sacred activists sharing that sacred activism for a particular cause, and they're popping up, they're growing across the planet, sowing seeds for a new humanity. And I'll have to move on very quickly. Okay. So, human consciousness is, and a consciousness revolution is inviting us into the reign of love. I'm so sorry, I have to rush now because I have one or two other lovely things I want to share with you, but never mind. Human consciousness, our consciousness revolution is inviting us into the reign of love. Human consciousness is a blossoming, a flowering of a living universe. And scientists tell us that at the beginning of the flaring forth, the beginning of the universe, conditions were just right. It was finely tuned for the emergence of that exotic bloom. But at this time in our evolution, it is like a bud poised to either burst into flower or wither on the vine. And that means that everything we do as individuals at this time matters. Every time we choose kindness over selfishness, we're helping to avert our collective extinction and bring us closer to the reign of love. But the challenges we face in our transition from ego to essence, from a whole new level of consciousness, demand more from us at this time than a friendly smile in the street. Each and every one of us is being called to be sacred activists. And to do that is to passionately participate in a process of awakening and become a part of a socially engaged spirituality. In the words of Teilhard de Chardin, one of the magnificent pioneers of our evolutionary spirituality story, we must, through every form of effort, help to raise the powers of love upward to the next stage of human consciousness. And darling, I'm just going to end with one verse from Christopher Fry, right? So I invite you, what I've been saying to you today and what's been said in the course of the day is beautifully summed up with one verse from the poet and playwright Christopher Fry, writing about half a century ago. It's so relevant to our time now. And I invite you to really feel into it by closing your eyes, and perhaps, which I'm going to do, and place your hands perhaps over your heart center again. Listen deeply, take a few deep breaths, or soften your body again, coming into the heart. And he wrote, "Cold and dark we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries cracks, breaks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring." What a beautiful poetic imagery of the meltdown of the patriarchy and our consciousness revolution, the birth of spring. He goes on, "Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to meet us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the largest stride of soul folk ever took." The largest stride of soul, what a wonderful way of describing our transition from ego to higher self or essence or snowflake self, or what do you wish to call the next stage of consciousness evolution, a stride of soul. Affairs are now soul-sized. The enterprise is exploration into God. Exploration into God, a wonderful way of describing our inner journey, our mystical renaissance. He ends, "Where are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake." In other words, it's taken thousands of years for consciousness to reach a point in our evolution where it is ripe to embody the transcendent. That time is now. It takes so many thousand years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake?